everyone, welcome to another episode of the Smart on PhD podcast. And today's PhD is a woman who has worked in a domain which is very similar to the domain that I have worked in. So I'm extra excited about it because whenever I say that I worked in multi-axial fatigue of nuclear material steels, I feel I'm afraid that people might zone out. But this lady will get it because she herself is a PhD in metallurgical and engineering sciences, and also a material scientist, currently research and development, a senior research and development engineer at UTechtics. We have Dr. Geeta with us today in the Smart Dumb podcast, and we are going to dive straight into what are the smart and dumb moments in her career and during her PhD journey that has taught her lessons that she carries with her and keeps evolving with them. So, Dr. Geeta, welcome to the Smart Dumb PhD podcast. And the straight question I will go right away to is, what made you do a PhD?
Oh, wow. First of all, thank you, Rima, for inviting me to this podcast. And yep, I'm happy to be here. And I hope, I can share certain things that can help people who are listening to this. Yeah, what made me do my PhD? It's a very interesting question. And I actually often ask this question to people when they come for mentorship. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, I did my bachelor's in metallurgy from NIT Jamshedpur, and when I was doing my third year, I kind of heard about paid internships like INAE, IAS programs in
Right.
India,
Yeah.
and so during that program, I applied for INAE and I got an internship at IIT Madras to work under BS Murthy, and now he's the director of IIT Hyderabad. So I mean, he was one of the like still like the metallurgist in India and the worldwide. So when I was working in his lab, there were so many things that I was working, and I realized, oh, I didn't even know these things, and I'm gonna get a degree in metallurgy in 1 year, and I'm like, am I really actually qualified to call myself as a metallurgist?
Yeah.
So I was doubting that a lot, and then one day he walked in my office where I was sitting, and he said, "I think you should do research. You should do PhD. You are meant for doing research." And that kind of made me think maybe it's like that's the answer. So that's where I decided to like apply for, and I did apply for IIT Madras PhD. I got into it, so I never thought of any career before. Yeah.
Okay, great. So long story short, you always had a person to nudge you to get into research, right? Now, in your journey of research, we're going to get into how you transition, but in your journey of PhD research, what were your toughest moments, Gita? Did you ever feel like, oh, I'm going to quit, I'm running away?
3 times. I actually thought I'm gonna quit PhD 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can see, like my PhD has been a little different, unique journey than normal PhD because I had a joint degree.
Hmm.
So 2 places, dealing with 3 supervisors, multiple committee members, and
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
It was a lot to, and also like 2 different countries, 2 different environment.
Right.
It was a lot for me. So when I started in the first at IIT Madras, I mean, I come from like my bachelor was in NIT, but I have to be honest that like the level of education and the courses, the fundamentals are different. So I was overwhelmed when I joined IIT.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit! I have done all of that, but I feel like there are so many concepts that I still like just know it theoretically, practically
Hmm.
I don't know. So I
Hmm.
was overwhelmed about at that point, but then slowly writing papers or something, it's very important that you choose the right group, right environment, and everything. And I, by no means I'm saying that my group was wrong or anything,
Hmm.
but I had to be very much self-reliant because I was with a supervisor who had a very high expectations.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I thought I'm gonna fail there,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
imposter feeling that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
There was a point, and then certain points the experiments were failing, and I just felt like, you know what, I think I'm done, I'm wasting time, I can't do this.
Hmm.
So there were 3 times almost in the fourth year of my PhD I thought I'm just gonna quit it, it's
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
But I remained, and here I am. So yeah.
Yeah, so that reminds me of my quitting journey also because I wanted to quit. And that comes again from the fact that I was not from metallurgy background. I was from a polymer
Yeah.
science background and I moved into mechanical metallurgy. And people say people don't tend to take mechanical metallurgy because it's very hard.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also quit. Uh, but then at that same point, I was pregnant and I went and told my husband, I'm quitting. And he told me that, okay, quit. What are you going to tell the baby? It was hard. Something just clicked in my head. I can't say that, so I'm not quitting. So the journey continued, anyways. So coming back to one point you touched is you had two very different ecosystems that you had to operate between, right, Geeta? So I want to know when you shifted from IIT Madras to Michigan University, what is one big shift you had to adjust with, apart from the working culture and any other thing that comes to your mind?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was a huge shock on so many things. First thing is like the climate. Like I was coming from Chennai,
Yeah,
Madras to Michigan State. It
yeah,
was like two
both.
entirely different pole.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
one is like so hot and humid and there's snowy.
Yeah.
So that was a different thing. But then I have never dreamt of like, like till then, I never thought I'll leave country, I'll go abroad. That wasn't in my list at all, bucket list.
Hmm,
It
hmm,
was just all like, my path was paved and I got this. And when I was there, the culture, like the climate shock, and then also the environment inside IIT campus is different than, like US universities environment. It's entirely different.
hmm.
Some of the habits that back home, like in India, I used to be very like easygoing, like, oh, it's fine. The lab is there, hostel is there, mess is there. You just bike around the campus, you're done. The
Yeah.
sense of responsibility hit me hard when I actually moved to Michigan State. Then
Hmm,
I had to actually like be in an apartment, cook for myself, and
hmm,
then like manage to get on time in the lab. And then the culture is different, the work
hmm,
culture, as you said, or even in general, the culture of like being on time, or
hmm.
you should follow like specific time. It's not nobody's saying you to do it, but you just feel the peer pressure because everyone
Right.
is doing it.
Yeah.
So those kind of a thing, it started changing, but I actually enjoyed those changes. It was
Hmm,
that made me really a disciplined person.
hmm,
So those were a few changes. And then about like the professors teaching is here in the US, I found is like very practical based, like teachings, the courses, the classes that keeps you engaged. It's not like, one night before exam, you just go and talk to your friends and you will be able to like finish it, just go through the notes and you can write the exam next day. These
yeah.
courses here are very engaging. So throughout the semester, there is no way you can avoid it. Like you have to be
Right.
like talking to friends, what's going in the class, what do the projects in a team and everything. So those were small changes, but good changes.
Hmm, hmm. Okay. And one thing that you think was an advantage while pursuing your PhD in India?
Oh, advantage. I, yeah, I mean, I don't now at this point I don't want to call them as an advantage because that's somewhere it's harmful for your long term, which
Mhm.
was laying back, like everyone was very chill around, like
I,
people
I
had
think
a
I think
strength.
I have a word for it. It's called the chalta hai attitude. Would you agree?
Exactly, very
Yeah.
precise.
Yeah.
I totally agree on that. That's the thing. Like, people were like everyone was stressed 24-hour. Like
Yeah.
I can bet like all the PhD scholars back in India, like in IIT, they're always stressed.
Hmm.
But then still the spark is missing because people like, oh, let's go for a tea break, let's work in the night. So
Hmm.
there is no balance and they have mixed their personal life and professional so much. Their
Complete.
stress is throughout in their body and like, brain. It's
Hmm.
completely in there. And that is why this chalta hai attitude,
Hmm.
somewhere they're not realizing it, that it's harming them. And
Hmm.
I thought that was, an advantage back home. I was
Yeah.
like, I was so chill there. But then no, that's kind of somewhere a disadvantage in a long run. So
Hmm, hmm, hmm. I'm glad you touched upon it because I had experienced it when I moved from my work after my master's to working at General Electric as a scientist, where you were not awarded for working long hours, but you were considered as unproductive if you didn't finish your work in 8 hours. Okay. So that
absolutely.
was a complete shift in everything, right? In the way we think about things. So that's the reason I asked that chalta hai attitude that stays. Okay. Yeah, there are many advantages. So on that note, let's come back to your transition, Geeta. When did you feel that you should move to industry and not stay in academia?
Okay, very, very interesting question. So yeah, I mean, one thing I always had of this, like I really love public speaking. So since my undergrad, like I would always participate and I'll go for, presentations. I would participate in as much as conferences I could.
Mm,
And I would like not to like show up, but I would win prizes on presentation and that made me like making me feel that I'm good at it.
yeah,
And that thing was there, but I also wanted to do research.
yeah.
So in the research, you have to write papers, read papers, write papers. And so after my PhD, I joined Oak Ridge National Lab. It's a government lab here, which works mostly. It's a mostly on like government fundings, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and everything. So I
Mm,
was working at Oak Ridge National Lab for 2 years as a postdoc. I was really enjoying it.
mm,
Everything was great, but there was somewhere I was feeling that I'm not meant to be for this. I think I'm meant for something else. I have a spark that is being suppressed,
mm,
which was like being inside a lab room. Like I was still making the presentations, talking about the work, but it was just like, no, I think this isn't my audience. My audience is something different.
mm,
Like
mm.
these are just the researchers who are just talking about the small changes in dislocations or microstructure or
It's
any
very
material
deep. It's
behavior.
going very deep, but you're not feeling the impact of the work. Is that right? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
absolutely. So
yeah.
I started feeling that, and I was like, maybe, industry. I mean, and there is often always a word people use it during the interview saying that, oh, why do you want to join industry? And people say, I want to go to fast-pacing environment.
Hmm,
Industry is called fast-pacing environment.
hmm, hmm.
And I like, you know what? I think I should see it. I think I'm meant for it. And people told like, you are a hardcore researcher. You will not like it. You will miss the
Hmm,
research.
hmm.
And I said, it's okay. I
Yeah,
may come back, or I'll find, I trust myself. If I'm a
right.
hardcore researcher, I'll
Yeah.
find the way, but I don't want to regret it that I'm afraid and I don't want to go. So I thought, let's give it a chance, and then I started applying for industry jobs, and I got the job that I am into right now.
Hmm. Now that you've made the transition, it amazes me that even now people carry this myth that industry might not be the right place to do research. So now that you have made the transition, why do you think we carry this myth? And the more we speak about it, the less it is. What is your opinion there, Geeta?
Very, I mean, you've touched a very right point, and this is a very correct time I'm seeing like this. And I'll be honest, there are some aspects of it that people still feels it, and they're not wrong about it. So
Right.
what happens is that industrialist and the researcher, there's a big gap
Hmm.
in their thought, and I don't blame either of them,
Hmm.
because both of them are living their own world.
Absolutely.
And basically industry, the researchers are the foundations of it, but
Hmm.
then the industry is the building. Like that's where the infrastructure is, that's where the world is, like running, the engineers and everything. So what happens is the research, and there is like lack of connect, and the industrial people are like, they don't have the faith in the research that happening, because
Yeah,
from the start the research was not connected to industry. So it
absolutely.
feels like all the results that coming from the research,
Hmm.
it's not going to be applicable to them, so they're afraid of changes. The
Hmm.
industry people are afraid of changes, and that is why they're so afraid of any research. You say, oh, R&D has proved it, they're afraid. They're like, where's the pilot scale? So there's
Exactly.
in between, which I feel is a big gap, is a pilot scale. Like
Hmm.
research and industry, research lab, university, whatever, and
Hmm.
then the pilot scale should be always in collaboration with the industry that you're targeting with.
Hmm.
And so both of them should have to, like, come together, participate in the pilot scale plant, where it could be located in the lab side, or it could be located in the industry, which
Hmm.
is what R&D sector of any industry is there.
Hmm.
But not all in, like, industries have R&Ds in there. I
Hmm.
mean, all the researches that is going on in the labs or the university, they need finally some avenue to go in a practical world. Not everybody has a connection directly with the industry. That is where I think the fear is still there, and the industry people are still, like, very much reserved about that. No, we don't want just R&D coming in our directly applying to, because they're afraid of cost. Industry runs based on business model. Like, we have
Yes.
to understand that research forgets about business,
Right.
which is what they're preparing for. They're preparing for technology transfer to be in a business,
Hmm.
and they forget about it. So it's kind of there's still a lack, and I think it's still gonna be there until, like, we keep. I mean, maybe we can talk further about, but I don't want to mix up all the topic. But the current topic that I work with is rare earth industry,
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
rare earth, we have so much of research, but now ex-China, any country other than China is struggling to start their own rare earth industry.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not because there is less of research,
Hmm.
because for decades the research and the industry never connected with with
Hmm.
each other, and
Hmm.
now they're struggling to find that confidence in each other to start actually, and
Hmm.
it has been a real problem right now.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. That reminds me again of my days at GE, because we had something called technology readiness level. I believe you might
Yeah,
also have that TRL, right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
depending on the TRL level you work, and this translation of your work at lab scale to a pilot scale is what gives the confidence. Okay, this is a scalable thing. And this connection we are not trained to make just when we are working on lab scale, where we are working so deep. And you mentioned dislocations. I remember, what kind of dislocations, what direction, and all of that. It doesn't matter, right? And we need to zoom
Exactly.
out and think about where it's going. So I totally agree to that point. And one more thing I had happened to see during my time in GE, that as researchers, we were not focused on writing papers at all. That's number one. Number two, also, we didn't believe in the papers so much, the papers published, apart from the experimental stuff, once we wanted to understand whether we could do it or not. So is it the same with you guys also? I just wanted to know, like when it comes to research papers. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, yeah, I mean the research paper. I mean my experience for so far was postdocs, or my PhD was very much a fundamental like material science. But right now I'm in a manufacturing industry where we don't
Right.
care about the microstructures or anything, but
Exactly.
it's more of like a separations, melting, and temperatures. And yes, it's very similar. Like we see what technique they are following. And if
Hmm.
someone says, "Oh, it has to be precise at 530 degrees Celsius," the
Hmm.
moment they see that, they reject it, because
Hmm.
industry is never gonna reach a specific temperature. You
Hmm.
gotta provide a window. Like you have to understand how industry runs. Like it's not a lab scale research. I want
Yeah.
to give one example is also when we see some research that has been done on like we all know that when there is a research we do in the lab or universities, like all the material that we get, raw materials, if it's not industry collaborated, we ask the material from a lab suppliers. They get from small amount, they make it in a lab and they supply it to you and you do your research.
Hmm. Hmm.
Does the industry take the same amount, same type of raw material? No.
No.
So the
Yeah.
raw material is gonna change. Your whole history, whole lab research that you have done is it's all gonna change. It
Yeah.
changes with that,
Yeah.
and researchers don't realize it. And I don't blame them, because industry also needs to come forward and tell them that
Hmm.
look, if you're using a lab provided raw material and doing your research,
Hmm.
we're not gonna get lab material for our industry work. So
Hmm.
they need to come forward, provide them a sample, and that is why I'm very glad. Like in India, like for a few years like ago, this PMRF funding happened, where
Hmm.
there is a collaboration between industry and academia, which is very much needed. It's
Hmm.
happening, and at least they're allowing those meaningful research to happen, where they're directly collaborating with industry, making meaningful research so that they can use it. So the
Hmm.
money is going in the right direction for those research. But I
Hmm.
feel bad for some research which is very entirely like lab based. And I mean, I have to say that there's two different in research. One is like fundamental science
Yeah.
that
And we
absolutely will
need
happen in
it.
the lab scale.
Yeah. And we
Exactly.
need it. Right.
But
Yeah.
absolutely, by no means. But then the other engineering, like applied research, like
Yeah.
fundamental science research and applied science research. With
Yeah.
applied science research needs to be happen in collaboration. If
Hmm.
it's not, then there is a very less chance of you like, and it's gonna like, I'll say, cripple around like to reach to actual destination. So that's how I see it.
Hmm.
And yep, so your question, to answer that, like yeah, we also look at like experiments and kind of it makes it hard if we don't find a relevancy. We don't
Yeah.
see practical points like us, like if there is not enough of, I would say, like allowance or window given, it kinds of
Right.
make it doubtful for us.
Yeah, yeah. And one more thing is like I remember again, quality was very important. So the Six Sigma protocols we followed at G, right? Like number of
Yeah.
times we do the repetitions of experiments to ensure that the data is precise and concise and there's reproducibility. These are things
Yeah.
we don't get the scope to do at lab scale, right, Geeta? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
again is something, again, as you said, you cannot blame PhDs for it. We don't know that it's important. I believe that's also one thing that needs to be ingrained in us as PhDs, that the reproducibility of the data. If I do it here and you do it in USA, it should be the same with the range given, the tolerances given. So your quick
Absolutely.
opinion on that.
Yeah, I think my opinion is that I think that's very much like, I think I don't want to, like, I'm not saying to blame it, but I think it's a responsibility of supervisors in there, because
Right.
PhDs are
Yes.
starting, but the supervisors who have this experience, who actually do travel the world and like connect with this consultancies or to funding persons or anything, it's their responsibility to actually tell them that look, there's a life beyond PhD, life outside PhD. You're not gonna carry the result that you get,
Hmm.
that screw dislocation is the dominant factor in this. That's
Yeah.
not the one you're gonna carry about it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have the final application that okay, if you're twisting or you're turning, then in this application it's gonna fail. That's what you're gonna carry, not the exact. So I think it's a responsibility of the advisors to talk about this, make them aware of it, allow them to also visit industries. Like that should be some part of that. And I think somewhere I feel like, based on my experience, I'm not generalizing for everyone, but I feel like professors kind of reserve it a lot. Like they kind of think, okay, they're writing papers, okay, doing the research in the lab, or there are 2 conferences allowed for you, 3 conferences allowed for you, go for it. No,
Hmm.
like let's think beyond, more than that.
Hmm.
Think about that you're shaping someone's career. Like
Hmm.
in those 5 years, what they're gonna learn and believe,
That they
that's
can
gonna
take
change their
forward.
life.
Yeah. That they can
Exactly.
take
And
forward. Yeah.
it's your time to make a big impact. So please, like, allow them, like, make them go with you in certain meetings where they can. They just let them sit there, let them listen to those discussions.
Hmm.
Because I have seen, it's a huge difference in India. At least what I experienced was we were like, on the backside character. Like we would do research in the lab, but all the discussions happens with professors. Maybe I get it, they want to have a boundaries and stuff, but for a PhD you got to stop treating them like a student. There's a difference. Like they're still as a student, but not an undergrad student or school kid. Like let them be
Yeah.
professional, let them be sitting in their discussion.
Hmm.
Maybe like ask them to just take notes. That will help you as well and them as well. So
Hmm.
those kind of a thing, I think, like, and that was a change that I saw in the US when I was here. I was allowed to sit in big discussions that made me feel confident that
Hmm.
they trust me.
Yeah.
They think that I'm worthy to be sitting here listening to this conversation. And someone will allow you in a conversation only when they think that you're worthy, you are smart enough to understand that. And that gives you like sense of confidence. So I think
Absolutely.
that,
Yeah, I totally get that. And like when I got into my first industry job, which was a scientist at General Electric, I was allowed in rooms where there were big discussions about projects because from day one, you're taught that you have to take ownership in next couple of
yeah.
months. So they're training you constantly that, yeah, see what's happening, absorb it. And then fortunately also the mentors that I got to work at CSIR National Metallurgical Laboratory, one of my mentors was from Oxford and he was again, this is your research. You need to be in rooms where we discuss the details. So that happened in my case. So coming back to one thing again, which is you moved again from Oak Ridge National Laboratory to the role that you are in right now, which is a senior engineer and senior research engineer and developer, right? So how did you make that shift? Like, how did you connect the dots for yourself? Like, how did you narrow down that, okay, this might be a place where I can find a place to use my skills?
Yeah, no, it was a very, very big transition and different, but
Yes.
I loved this transition. It was, so as I said, I was working on a fundamental material science research in a
Yeah.
national lab where I was confined to be in an office, maybe sit in meetings, talk about the results that I got. That's all.
Hmm.
And also there was a little of constraint that I want to mention is because I was a foreign national and national
Hmm.
labs, because we
Hmm.
work on a sensitive projects, there is
Hmm.
limitation of where I could be involved in a project. I would still work for those, but I wouldn't be like, going through the discussions with the higher ups because there was a restriction on that.
Yeah.
But then when I got this job,
Hmm.
which they were hiring me, and I was very nervous about it. They were hiring me for like rare earth industry, which I had
Never
no
worked
research
out. Yeah.
background in,
Yeah.
like
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
Like the only thing was like connection was my degree in metallurgy. That's all.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
had the confidence that she has a fundamental understanding of metallurgy and she'll be able to do it.
Hmm.
And then melting, and I went to the site industries like big vacuum induction melting furnaces, and
Hmm.
my research wasn't in synthesis at all. Like I was more on a processing side,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I wasn't even melting even in lab. Also I was doing heat treatments and other stuff. So this where but I thought, okay, Geeta, it's okay. If they trust on you, you have to trust yourself.
Hmm.
It's okay, you can do it.
Hmm.
And PhD has trained me to learn new topics. Like
Absolutely.
when we start PhD, we're afraid because we're committing for a big part of our life for something bigger, just in a faith that you can do it. You'll
Right.
be able to learn it, you can do it. That's the faith that you start with. And I thought, okay, maybe this is another phase and that's how it's going to be. So
Hmm.
just have a faith in yourself. I did read a little bit to begin with. My When I started my job, I started reading some fundamentals metallurgy back home, like, in the night when I come back home, I'll read more
Yeah.
and I'll prepare myself because I just wanted to make sure that I fulfill the expectations, and also, I
Hmm.
mean, I want to be good at my job. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that was one thing. But the point that made me connecting was always that, being thorough about certain things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like how we are trained to read research papers, like now, like a normal person who hasn't done PhD, if you ask them to
Will take a lot
read
of
a
time.
paper,
Yeah. To
exactly.
extract, to get the essence of what might be useful. Yeah. We might take just a
And
minute or two that, okay, this is the paper I need. Yeah. Right.
exactly. So those kind of a skill set I used from there, and then designing experiments, all those things, the leadership skill, like I'm like hard skills, those were like how used, and soft skills is exactly what you need in industry. There's one big thing that I want to tell people, like maybe we can talk about this, is that there's a difference between hard skill and soft skills, and people so much sweat about hard skills. But trust
Mhm.
me, industry people are caring more about your soft skill than hard skills.
Yeah.
If you say you're
I,
quick
I want
learner,
to get deeper into it because this is a large part of my coaching that
oh,
as
nice.
PhDs, we are so trained to sweat about the hard skills, right? But then forget completely about the soft skills. So maybe if you can share an instance from your interview or your time at U Tactics currently, where how soft skills are helping you. And at the entry point, they may not be as important, but as you move forward, it takes a lot of weightage than the hard skills. So if you can elaborate something with examples, Geeta, that will be so useful for the audience hearing this.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, yeah, you like put it a very right place. So I'm just gonna, yeah, I think it's my soft skill that has actually allowed me to get this job and be whatever I'm right now. It's been only 6 months with the current job, but
Hmm.
I tell you not like this there's so many things that I'm doing in this company, and because they trust me, and not because I had like training, because I'm looking at making budgets with them.
I
I'm
want to
also,
stop you right there. Okay. I want to ask you, do you have any idea, like, why do they trust you? What is it that you do that makes them trust you, Geeta?
I think, yeah, to answer that is because, I guess, there are people who can expressing yourself. I would just want to put in that word.
Hmm.
The way I express myself,
Hmm.
they, like if I'm saying, I don't know, but I can do this. If I speak like that, people won't have it, the
Hmm.
trust on me. Like, but I
Hmm.
say, no, I think we can do it. I know that the number is this, but I'm not certain about it, but I'll read and come back to you.
Hmm.
So both ways I'm
I want to stop you
uncertain.
right there. This is so interesting. Why? Because you actually captured the emotion of it. The previous time when you said, I don't know, but I can do it, is like you're just reflecting your insecurities to them, right? And I think at times, even if you have those insecurities, don't reflect it back. Project it with
Exactly.
confidence. Would you agree? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead. You
absolutely.
might be
Yeah,
having a lot of
absolutely. Like,
insecurities. I believe everyone has it, but don't need to
absolutely.
project it. And people often think that people will catch my emotions, that I don't know it, but it's not that. It's me having it within me and I'm projecting it.
I mean, there's nothing wrong in saying I don't know, but then there is a way that if you don't know, you have to tell them that I don't know, but I'm willing to and I'm ready to come back with an answer.
Yeah.
And that's make them feel that, okay, she's ready to do it. And if you don't know, it's like there's, as you said, like you can say, I don't know and
Mm,
stop. But I
mm,
say, yeah, I'm not certain about this, but I know that I can go back and read. Allow me 2 minutes, or allow me 2 hours, or allow me 2 days, and
mm,
I'll come back with this. And how about we do a presentation about?
mm,
And that makes you, there's so many emotions came, leadership, the
mm,
curiosity,
mm.
right approach, right expressions, and at that
I
point,
think ownership
like
too.
people,
You're taking ownership, even though you don't know it.
ownerships,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's all about expressions. I think that gives them a trust on me, that like, they allow me to like represent. So we work with the government a lot here at this company as well, because we work, rare earth, and now knowing that the geopolitical situation of rare earth, and
Yeah.
I am allowed to speak to government personnels,
Mm,
even though I've been just here for like 6 months.
mm.
I've been hardly learning about the company, so many other things every single day, but just because how I feel confident about certain things, they trust me on that. And I think
And I
we were
see the
talking to.
excitement in you as you are stating that. I'm getting excited about it, the thing that you do. Okay. So, as we spoke about this soft skill thing, I want you to quickly touch upon the learning curve. Okay. I believe there's a learning curve everywhere. And one thing that's been true with me is the learning curve in academia is a little slow. And you realize that when you come in industry, because you move on from project to project where you are not going so much deep, but your breadth is increasing because your fundamentals are now solid. What do you feel about that? The learning curve in industry.
Yep, very good point. That project to project moving is, and one thing I learned is like when we say, oh, multitasking,
Yeah.
trust me, there is two different meaning of multitasking in industry and academia.
Hmm.
Like when I was in another point was in academia, my learning curve was that, with my mentors, I don't know why, it was maybe cultural or maybe how I was brought up, but I always felt like I have to respect like respecting, there is a difference between respecting and being afraid of it. So I
Yeah.
kind of mixed it too. And I
Yeah.
used to be respecting, but I was a little afraid to tell them
Yeah.
and express fully myself. But on the industry, when I realized, okay, there is nothing called like, my PI or supervisor in that sense, like how we have been taught in academia. And then here, I wasn't afraid to tell things. Like I'm still respectful. They all love me. Like, but then, I'm also not afraid to tell the thing is like, no, I think we should do this. No, I
Hmm.
believe what you're saying is right, but
Hmm.
let's take this approach. So
Hmm.
this leadership skills, that was my learning when I moved from academia to here.
Hmm.
And
I,
another
I,
thing,
yeah, yeah,
go
please go
ahead.
ahead.
Now, I was just talking about the multitasking, like the learning in the academia was like when I thought multitasking is, like
Doing
you
multiple
are
stuffs together and doing it all right. But that's a very different thing in industry where
industry very
you
different.
are time boxing. You're making sure you're putting your time for one particular project one day, and another day you're putting it for something else. That's how I work. Yeah, you can add to it, Lita.
Similar to that, yeah, like the work could be in industry. It's not the just technical project that you're working. Some days you have to deal with someone, you're like supervisor for other people, like, there are operators working
Hmm.
for you. And then some days you just have to look at their problems
Hmm.
immediately. Like it's not even someday. Like the moment I'm like having a call with a discussion call with something that we have to give a budget number right away, like we're talking about millions of dollars in there, and then suddenly they come with a problem that, oh, my furnace, there is a explosion and it's kind of everywhere, and then I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
So you immediately have to switch there and think about it. And then there's someone came and then says, "Oh, my safety shoes is, it's torn away. I need to get it." So you immediately have to switch, and that's the multitasking. And you cannot complain. And it may sound like a small thing, but when you're working in this kind of environment, it's very dynamic, like quickly
Right.
changing your thought process. And the
Yes.
multitasking isn't doing with your hand.
Yes.
Multitasking is doing with your brain. Like you have to simultaneously think about multiple things in different directions. And
Hmm.
I think that was very different in academia and in industry.
I want to
So
come back to that respect part also. The respect in academia has an element of fear in it, right? For
oh,
the
it's
PIs there,
hyped. It's
yeah,
hyped.
it's like you maintain a distance because you're scared, but the respect in industry is from a place of that professional colleague and professional boundaries. And there's no fear in it. If you're in the right culture, it's more about, ownership. Like you are like two friends working on the same project who are in a professional space, and there's no fear in between, because if that is there, then it won't work out properly, right? Yes. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so thank you for covering that multitasking part and this respect thing. So now, having moved from PhD to postdoc to industry, where do you see yourself? Like, do you see yourself continuing in industry, or do you have any plans to go back in academia, or it's too early to say? How are you feeling
No,
about it? Yeah.
no, I think academia is never my plan. Like I think I'm very clear on that. I guess I
Yeah.
do enjoy my work in industry, but then, I mean, it's too early to say for that. But I do think sometime about like having my own business, or working as a, like in future, like after maybe 10 years or so,
Hmm.
maybe working for consultations, having my own consulting jobs
Yeah.
for industry, because I think I'm really growing in a area that I do have a fundamental backgrounds of all technical understanding, but then now I'm involved with the industries. I do interact with clients every single time, like
Hmm.
every day, like at least there's 5 clients meeting that I go with. I talk to them, and I think I'm kind of understanding, and it's very interesting. So maybe sometime I do feel like I want to end up having my own, like consulting business there, where I could just help not just one industry or one sector, but then people that I see the problems or advantages that we can work together. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. But yeah, academia is, I think I'm very glad that I made this choice. Nothing wrong about it, but I'm not meant for it. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed this. I was mentally stressed, I
Yeah.
think I would say.
Yeah. So amen on the fact that your consultancy and all of that comes up, because you're working on rare earth, and I see that you are a rare resource there, because not many people are working in this particular area. So you're positioning the expertise that you're going to be developing over the years is going to be so useful, because this is one thing that's going to drive the entire economy across the world, right? And if you had to mention a couple of traits, Geeta, for people who want to choose between academia and industry, okay, what is one differentiating trait that they should consider, that okay, I am this kind of a person, so I don't think I would be a right fit for academia? For me, I know it. I just want to hear it from you, because I hear from people, I don't know whether I should stay in academia or not, because sometimes the decisions to stay in academia comes from a place of comfort, that they're aware of it, right? So if they move into it, they know what all to do, and then the industry is so unknown, it creates a fear, right? So the decision may not be right that way. So I always tell them, like, think about it this way, that in future, if you project yourself and you have an industry job, you have an academic job, and you're doing extremely well in both of them, where would you go? Where is your mind jumping onto in the first go? And if you're saying industry, then even if you're feeling scared at this moment, industry is where you should go. So what is that one trait you think is required in industry that if you don't have, you shouldn't consider industry?
Yep, I guess I would say maybe, what I'm gonna say maybe sounds very cliche, is like,
Yeah, it's
ask
a
yourself
cliche
what
thing.
makes you happy.
Yeah,
So,
right.
but
Yeah.
it has a deeper meaning. What makes you happy is a deeper meaning. Like, do you like, for example, I mean, maybe I'm gonna talk about for two different stage. One that who has seen both side, and one who's still in the stage where they wanna make a decision. Like maybe they're about to graduate and they're still thinking, should I apply for academic position or go to industry? So there's two places. So I'll start with the first, this one, where there's grad student and they're about to, like graduate and make this decision. I would say, think about your, like your characters, your like that, how, like, do you have a characteristics of someone afraid of speaking to people, like, public
Hmm.
speaking
Hmm.
or something. It's not that you shouldn't be exploring it. That's one couple of things that you have to think about it.
Hmm.
And I think people who are afraid of doing something, they should do just the opposite when they're early in their career.
Hmm.
Do
Hmm.
it. If you're afraid of speaking to people, then go for conferences, do public speaking, because
Absolutely. I'm
even if
with
you
you. I
do
second
the
that.
worst,
Yeah.
do the worst. It's okay. Who's gonna
Yeah.
judge you? You're nothing. That's what you have to think. That way. It's like, I'm nothing. Who knows me? I'm like, that's
Yeah.
how I like train myself. I'm like, yeah, if I, I do wrong, like my first panel speaking or my first presentation, I know that how terrible I did, but
Right.
that made me where I am today. Is
Yeah.
that now I can publicly speak to people, like, on certain topics that I'm not even prepared for.
Hmm.
So just whatever makes you fearful, do that. That's one thing. But then if you're so passionate about research, and how do you find it out? Well, by this time, like, you're done PhD or you're almost in like final years of it, what are the things that involves in research. It's
Hmm.
like finding out the problem. Sometimes research is not about that the problem is already existing. You also have to find the problem. You
Hmm.
also have to find the problem, and then you have to find the solutions. Do
Hmm.
you enjoy that?
Hmm.
And then sad part, sorry, like, I'm not a big fan of research paper, but the sad part is that you also have to writing papers and publishing all of that, which
Yeah.
is sometimes feels forceful for so many. Do you enjoy
Absolutely.
that? Do
Yeah.
you enjoy running behind writing funding projects and all? If you like all those things, if you think that will, not because that's the only thing you have seen it, but do you actually
Right.
enjoy doing it? If you do
Yeah.
enjoy doing it,
Then go
go
for
for
it.
academia. Then
Yeah.
there's no question for you. You don't have to. But if there is a slight question, doubt in your mind,
Hmm.
then after your, like, I think I would recommend everyone, after your, if you haven't done for industry,
Hmm.
go for at least 1 or 2 years of industry experience. Go for it. Then you
Hmm.
can always come back, always come back. Trust me. Like, people say you can't, you just have to trust yourself. It's just
Hmm.
how you project. Once you
Right.
come back from industry to academia, don't sell your experiences. I always tell people, like, for interviews or anything, never sell your experiences, sell your skill sets.
Right.
Sell your skills, not experience, but because your experience is your past,
Hmm.
and your skills is going to be tell that what you're going to do in future.
Future.
And people care
Absolutely.
about the future, not
Yes.
the what you did in your past.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I say left, right, and center inside my community. Project yourself for a job that you're going to be doing in the future, not your past, right? And
Exactly.
Geeta, I think we had a conversation and I had no clue that the time has been passing so fast because we had been
Yeah.
having so much fun.
Wow. Yeah.
I want to ask this question to you where if you did not do PhD, what would you have been doing? What do you think?
I'll be very honest. My background, like, I come from a very humble background. I did not have big dreams, because I'm gonna tell you, like, a very the truth is that we come from a very humble background. My dad never went to a school. My parents never went to a school. So my dad had a dream that I will have daughters, and when we have two sisters and one brother. So my
Yeah.
dad thought, at least my daughters will go to schools and they'll have high school education. That was his dream.
Yeah.
That was his dream. So when I went, like, I went in engineering, did from an IT Jamshedpur and all. I My dream was still confined. As like, at least now he was thinking high school I did engineering. Now I
Yeah.
can. So I being surrounded by Tata Steel and NML, all steel industries around.
Yeah.
My dream would have been to working for any industry over there in a steel company. But
Right.
maybe I would have been just a traditional engineer. Maybe I wouldn't be more creative or anything. That's maybe I would have done that if I wouldn't have done my PhD. So
Hmm.
that one internship that I cracked,
Hmm.
just figuring out by myself,
Hmm.
that one thing changed my whole life and career,
Hmm.
where I am, like, everything that
Hmm.
moving, like, living out of your comfort zone. So
Hmm.
yep, I mean,
Hmm.
I would be somewhere doing maybe in
Okay.
some
And
industry
what is
job.
your
Yeah.
one advice to people who are doing PhD in 2026? Is it even worth doing PhD in 2026 and beyond? What do you feel about that, Geeta?
Very good question, Rima. I think it's very important. And I think I was talking to someone, like my colleague, like, I think yesterday, about it, that, in India, now almost every, like, 1% out of 10%, like, who's in academia now, of not talking about all the populations, is doing PhD.
Yeah.
So that's very good question. Is it worth doing it? And no, I think people should in India definitely consider that. Why are they doing PhD? Because they're thinking it's comfort. You're getting 25,000, 30,000, whatever is current stipend right now. No, trust me, you can do much more than that. You're wasting your prime time of your life if you're doing just for that.
Right.
Ask, really ask. And I think, no, if you don't have a clear answer that why you want to do PhD, it's
Yeah.
not worth doing it. But
Yeah.
when I said India, it is different in the US.
Hmm.
Here, PhD is not a very, like, normal culture, like how right now in India and some few other countries that they have more
Hmm.
PhD candidates.
Hmm.
Here it's not. So PhD is still respected,
Hmm.
and you would find a big pay scale difference in PhD compared to, but in India, like if you're a PhD, you get maybe 10,000, 20,000 extra more than people, who are coming from bachelor's and some years of experience. Maybe
Yeah.
not even like,
Yeah.
if you have a bachelor's and 10 years of experience, you have a
You'll get a lot
PhD
more.
and
Yeah.
this, exactly, like
Yeah.
that's more considerable because in India, the people still, and the very, I mean, I don't blame industry people. The very reason that they think that PhD people are only trained for one subject, and why should we pay someone for doing, because they know about one subject, but
Yeah.
they don't actually see their true potential because they haven't been trained that way.
Hmm.
It's so, if you're in India and if you're considering PhD, no, you really have to ask why and where are you doing, with whom are you doing, what kind of a project, what exactly are you doing in PhD, and is there a market after it? If it's not, like for
Absolutely.
example, if, and
Yeah.
if there isn't a market just because you thought, oh, there is this project available, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
After that,
And you're going to
what?
suffer it. You're going to suffer that
Exact,
decision in
suffer
the long
it.
run. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Nobody told me about this. I'm sorry. Like, I just, a little bit of is that
please,
that
yeah.
when I was doing my PhD in superalloy, I actually didn't know about it. I just heard, oh,
Right.
superalloy is such a fancy term, and then
Yeah.
I, started doing PhD. Like, be
Yes.
honest.
Yes.
And afterwards, I saw there were other like friends of mine. They were doing research in like chips and all, like like uh, other material for semiconductors and stuff, and they
Just
had
now
more
the
opportunities.
hot zone, the hot cake. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So I kind of, and it's not that I was comparing, but I felt like I could have done that. I mean, I could
Right.
have taken, and nobody told me that there is a market that related to my PhD that I have to target.
Yeah.
And I wish, like, I don't regret anymore now, but at that point, I actually thought that I wish somebody had told me that
Right.
semiconductor would be more hot market. It's this time you should choose some project like that. I would
Yeah.
have gone maybe something for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these certain thing I think people should be like questioning about, at least in 2026, where
Right.
now
Very
there are
much.
so many resources available.
Yes, and that's the thing you mentioned, Geeta. It's the informed decision making. Okay. No one can predict the future, but making a
Absolutely.
decision from a place of information that, okay, this might be obsolete by the time I finish my PhD in this versus this might still be relevant, puts you in a better position. Otherwise, you will be like lost forever. And now with everything changing so rapidly, it's just you cannot blindly do a PhD, right? And
Agree.
the
Yep.
last question for you is, though we had this kind of suggestion, what is one suggestion you have for a PhD who is making a transition from academia to industry? One suggestion, if you had to share with them.
Wow. One suggestion, I guess, is be
Let
adventurous, I
me
would say.
be adventurous. Okay. Let me give some
Yeah.
context also. Like many times, what happens is when they're making that shift, they tend to have these massive setbacks where you go in interviews and then you don't make it and you start thinking that, oh, I'm not good enough. Maybe this is not my cup of tea. And because we have that critical PhD brain, which is very good at criticism, but not very good with compassion. So you get into that mode. The needle goes on that side a lot, the criticism, and that pulls you back and you are like, let me go back to postdoc. So that was the context, and that's why I wanted to ask you, what is your one suggestion there? You said be adventurous. Would you
Yeah.
want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Now, I'll take that back because I think that was more for once you transition. So I
Yeah.
think for this transitioning phase, when they're preparing for interview, I do have, okay, that actually put me like a very small short story that motivates me is be
Okay.
a
Yeah.
vintage car. That's one thing.
Yeah.
So what I mean is be a vintage car is, so what happens is, a vintage car has a value. When you try to sell this car in a scrap yard, it's gonna be a scrap value. If you try to sell it in normal market, it's gonna have a normal value.
Lot of
But
value.
the
Yeah.
vintage car has to be sold to a place where the
They
museum, and
value
then
the
when you,
vintage. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
so this is where, so you remember that you are the vintage car, always remember it. So maybe you get rejected in one interview, that's fine.
Hmm.
Sell yourself in the right place and keep trying. You try different markets, and do not, just one rejection is not gonna, maybe because you were in the wrong place, and it's okay.
Hmm.
Just remember that what are your skill set, what your value is, like, what your brand value is. And again, coming back to the same advice is, when you go such interviews, do not sell your experience that I worked on super alloys and I worked on transmission electron microscopies, like this kind of a terms, like, but you try to make it in a project. Oh my, I have experience working in super alloy with looking at the dislocation interactions particle using TEM. And no, don't say that. Oh, my skill set is transmission electron microscopy for materials. That's
Yeah.
a full stop.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
okay, they only look at the transmission electron microscopy, and you can apply for anything.
Right.
Similarly, I have an experience of working with extreme environment metal such as super alloy, or like stainless steel. So that means, oh, extreme environment materials. So
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
person understand the material system.
Yeah.
But the moment you start with the super alloy, they're like, oh, she's a super alloy person, we're looking for a steel person.
Right.
You're out.
Yeah, yeah.
You already captured their brain with the one keyword that they didn't want to listen, but you made them hear that.
Right, right.
So
And
that's where,
yeah, in my words, that's positioning precisely, right? And
yes.
Geeta, wonderful, wonderful conversation. And to my viewers, I just wanted to say we use the words like dislocation, super alloys, and everything because that has been our domain of work. So if it sounded foreign to you, then don't worry about it because this is all metallurgists speak about. And three things that stay with me from this conversation. One is the soft skills part. I believe, Geeta, you demonstrated it with your journey with so many examples that how important it is for the industry. And the second one is, the respect part, the subtle difference that you have learned that it's coming from fear and it's not fear in industry. And finally, the vintage car example was just spot on, Geeta. So, Geeta, this was a amazing conversation. I think we went deep, we went broad, we went in many different directions, and I'm pretty sure the audience will have a lot of takeaways from this conversation. Thank you so much, Geeta.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing. I love talking to you. Yeah.